Cottonman consists of two programs, Squareman and Bowman. Squareman uses Squaremap data and is primarily used to monitor the plant up till flowering, but can be used throughout the effective flowering of the plant. Bowman uses node above white flower data and is used to monitor the progress of the plant to maturity, and as we'll see in the next module, we use it to make some end-of-season decisions. In this module, we'll be looking at how to collect Squaremap data and how these data are used in Squareman. Collection of Squaremap data should be initiated at first square. By the time squares are obvious, sometimes there may be more than one actually squaring node on the plant, but we're just being a couple of days difference, so as long as we get out there at that time, it's all right. We have two once per season measurements. One is that we collect first fruiting node. In order to collect first fruiting node, we simply go in the plant, find the cotyledonary nodes, and then count up to where the first fruiting node is. This first fruiting node will either have a blank, it'll be a zigzag sympodial branch with either a square or the scar where it used to the square was. So we just simply count those number of nodes, and that gives us first fruiting node. The other once per season measurement that we make is plant density, and we do that with a stick we put out and determine the number of plants per 3 foot in some different sample areas of the field. The Squaremap data then the mapping data of the squares is then collected either once or twice a week and may be terminated at flower or can be continued throughout the effective flowering period until physiological cutout. The Squaremap data consists of two measurements. One is simply plant height. We simply measure the distance between the cotyledonary node and the apex of the plant for a representative plant at the sample site, and we generally will do that for plants in two different rows, so we get two measurements per site. And then the mapping data is simply indicating the presence or absence of a fruit in the first position. We start at the top of the plant and we look at the top node is one that we can see a visible square, and it's usually indicated with a leaf that it's about the size of a quarter and will be unfolded, but if you see a square, we'll call that a node. And simply start coding, and we use a code of 0 if there's no fruit there, 1 if there's a square present, and 2 if there's a white flower or bow present. So in this case, this would be a 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, all the way down to this position, which would be a 0. So there's a total of 9 nodes on this plant at this time. If we were looking at larger plants, we would, again, as we come down, we would see this would be a 0, this would be a 2 where a bow is present. So the Squaremap data involves mapping all the presence and absence of all of these first positions of the plant. The Squareman program then utilizes the Squaremap data to determine if the plant is developing at an optimum rate and whether square retention is acceptable. Under normal development, the plants should initiate first square at about 35 days after planting. The plants that emerge slowly or develop under cool conditions, it would take a longer period of time for this to happen. Once the first square occurs, then we expect an additional node to develop on this plant about every 2.7 days. So the average rate of one node every 2.7 days should be added to the plant. Plants that are stressed or under excessive temperature, moisture problems may not be able to develop those nodes at that pace. And if you start losing a lot of squares, it may actually increase the pace of nodal development. There's a series, the cotton plant can compensate for some of these lost squares. But the loss of these squares will end up delaying maturity, and if you get excessive loss, it can affect the yield of the plant. A critical value in Squareman has been determined as a 15% square loss. If it's over 15%, it will trigger a response, a management response. A series of decision rules have been incorporated into Squareman based upon these data, and it's based upon a series of 3 different types of data. One is the observed number of squaring nodes on the plant. Secondly, the slope of the increase of nodal development between sample dates. And third, the rate of square shed. Use of this information can help us do some very precise management of the cotton plant throughout the season.